So the internet has made it extremely easy for all of us to access information. According to a recent study, though, in the past 2 years, the average daily social media user spends about 145 minutes on their devices. With the abundance of COVID-19 related news doing the rounds, people are constantly inundated with bad news. So how does one keep the need to stay abreast with information on the one hand, before that phenomenon actually turns into doom scrolling? To answer this question and more, we're joined by hypnosis practitioner Sharon Dill. Sharon, we're going to talk about what a hypnosis practitioner does in the context of a pandemic. Before we get there, doom scrolling. Is this a new term that we've coined now, specifically in the past year or so of the pandemic?
Yes, I think so. I think this pandemic has really thrown us all into a state of complete panic. And I'm sure that anyone can relate to the fact that when you're in a state of panic, you don't really think clearly. You kind of like go into a state of fight or flight. And it's very difficult to be objective when you are overloaded and with this kind of information. And it's quite interesting what happens in the mind because, the mind, the subconscious mind, is actually programmed to keep us safe. And when we aren't safe, it can really present a sort of like an option of let's find out more, let's find out more, let's find out more. And, as we all know, there's all sorts of information on the internet, and not all of it is true. And a lot of it is like, people who are over exaggerating the problem. Not to say that the problem isn't a problem, it is. But I think we need to be quite level-headed and, just do what we need to do the research that you need to do, and then take the precautions. And from there, leave it to the professionals because that's what they're to do to solve the problem.
I mean, this issue around doom scrolling, it's sort of like the issue of Google Doctor. You have symptoms, related to COVID-19 or related to other diseases. You might just have a headache. You go onto Google, you put in your symptoms, and it gives you a worst-case scenario, doesn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. And if you go onto Google and start Googling symptoms, it can straight away present you 5 different really chronic diseases that you might have, and the more you look at it, the more the body actually goes into shock, and the more the body goes into shock, the less logical you become, and then you can easily become convinced that those things are actually real,
You raise such an important point, the fact that your body goes into shock because of all of this sort of doomsday information that you're reading about. Talk to us about that connection between the mind and between your physical health.
Well, it's quite interesting because what happens when we go into shock is that we go into a state of fight or flight. And when you go into a state of fight or flight, adrenaline gets activated in the body. And for us every day, a little bit of adrenaline is not a bad thing because it pumps blood to your brain. It makes you feel vitally alive. It gives you a feeling of power and being in control. It even makes you feel as if you're in control of the situation. You're doing something. But when we get to doing this doom scrolling all of the time, those adrenal glands become overworked. And then you can go into adrenal fatigue. And when you go into adrenal fatigue, the body stops producing adrenaline. And that's when it becomes a really big problem because we need adrenaline to actually function on a daily basis. And when there isn't it really can lead to depression, feeling low energy, feeling there's something wrong in the body. And when you have the feeling that something's wrong in the body, well, then you go to Google Doctor, don't you?
And so the cycle continues. So some advice for people who are in many ways, and I wonder who among us can say that we're not guilty of this, but who are in many ways obsessed with getting information specifically around COVID-19 in whichever country you are. Perhaps a good starting point would be to rely on only certain websites, only certain sources of information, so that you know that the information you're getting is information that you can trust.
Absolutely. I think the verified sites, are a very good source information, and if we stick to that, read it with a logical mind. It's, if you take the precautions, and you are very, very careful, you're doing the best you can to actually avoid it. And that's the approach to take. Do the social distancing, wear the masks, disinfect. I'm still seeing clients in my office, but I can tell you, I think I'm probably the most thorough person. I wipe down every surface, the desks, I spray the chairs, I spray everything in that room gets sprayed, because I want to make sure that my clients are safe. But I think generally, if you take those precautions in everyday life, you're doing what you need to do, and then you can really, and when you're doing what you need to do, you can start to feel more settled, more safe, and I also I always tell all my family, they laugh at me, I say, I gargle with alcohol gargle twice a day, and that kills all the germs. And that's a belief system. That's an interesting thing, because that's a belief system that I've put into my mind. And what's wrong with that? Why not program your mind to say that, well, I gargle twice a day with alcohol and anything just gets completely annihilated.
The experts have told us that those non-pharmaceutical interventions that you've described, wearing your mask, sanitizing, trying to stay home as much as you can, that those are effective preventative measures for COVID-19. You talk about some of the effects of doom scrolling, how it affects your adrenal glands. You may feel tired, you may feel run down. Sleep is a very important issue insofar as doom scrolling is concerned, because many of us will lay in bed just before going to bed and we'll go through social media, we'll go through the news websites. Again, just in terms of taking care of your health during the pandemic, also not a good idea to do that.
And it's an interesting thing, because too much adrenaline causes another hormone to be released in the body, and that hormone is called cortisol. And cortisol is directly linked to lack of sleep. And interestingly, lack of sleep is directly linked to weight gain, which is like crazy. So it's a whole big, once you start going down that rabbit hole, it's a mess. Don't do that to yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Sharon Dill, I want to ask you one last question about you being a hypnosis practitioner. Is this a line of work that is particularly valuable in the context of a pandemic?
Yes, absolutely. I work with anxiety on a daily basis. And I would say that I'm an expert in helping people to overcome anxiety. It is very effective. The thing with hypnosis is it's not a thing of controlling the mind. They've actually measured the brain wavelengths between hypnosis, meditation, and prayer, identical. So it's a quiet state. It quietens the mind, and that already helps to release anxiety. But I have a very powerful protocol of 6 sessions. I can tell you that if you come to me for anxiety, at the end of those 6 sessions, you will be your best self, and you will not recognize yourself, and you will absolutely be able to control any anxiety in 1 split second.
Well, there you are. Sharon Dill, thanks so much for your time this morning. Some interesting perspective there on doom scrolling, what it means for your physical health. Sharon Dill is a hypnosis practitioner.